So we're looking at fire safety today, and I've chosen this topic because we've seen a few trends appearing in our recent inspection reports that we've been looking at across England and Wales. So a little bit about myself first before I get into that. I am a qualified NEBOSH health and safety advisor. I specialised in that field during the early course of my career, and spent a good couple of years traveling around the UK undertaking fire risk assessments across several dental practices all over Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland. So I'm well rehearsed and well experienced in fire safety, especially within a dental sector. So during this webinar today, we're going to explore quite a few topics. We're going to have a look at how the inspectors look at fire safety to give it some relevance to yourselves. And on your screen now, you can see all the different areas we're going to explore. So hopefully at the end of this webinar, you'll go away with a little bit more confidence and be able to put things in place to make sure that you're inspection ready when CQC or the HIW knock on your door. So as mentioned earlier, we've been looking at inspection trends for the last 5 months. It's something we do behind the scenes here at Agilio. We look at 10 reports every month for both CQC and HIW. We pull out all the trends of those reports, analyze the data, and find out exactly what it is that inspectors are looking for or where their concerns lie when they're assessing practices. So I've pulled out 10 of the topics that we look at, which you can see down the left-hand side of the column. Quality improvement are your audits. Fire safety, medical emergencies, clinical governance, how you put things in play at the practice, your competence, your leadership, and the structure you have in the practice. Infection control, recruitment, risk management, workforce, radiation equipment. So that's just 10. Altogether, we look at around 22 topics. So if we look at this from a fire perspective, we've looked at 67 reports from January to May this year. And out of those 67 reports, we can see that 69% of practices have fallen down on fire safety. So at the moment, it's the second most problematic area that inspectors are finding. So it is quite a key topic. And again, that's one of the reasons why I've put this webinar together, to try and help you address these concerns that inspectors are picking up. So looking at the individual trends that inspectors look at, we've got a couple of things here. We've got the fire risk assessment that they will look at. They will look at your fire equipment maintenance records, and they will also check whether your fire equipment is suitable for your premises. They will look at your in-house fire safety checks, making sure that you're doing the necessary tests and inspections on the equipment. They will look at what fire safety procedures you have, your fire awareness training for all your team, and also whether or not you're doing fire evacuation drills. So again, I've picked out these 6 trends to look at, which we'll go through during the course of this webinar. But just to give you an indication of where the problems lie with these, we can see that out of those 67 reports that we've looked at so far, 49% of those practices have fallen down on the fire risk assessment and 49% on fire equipment maintenance. So 43% of practices are not doing the checks, 33% haven't got procedures in place, 22 are not doing training, and 19 are not doing drills. So again, they're quite high percentages. So a lot of practices are still having problems with implementing fire safety within their premises, or being able to evidence to the inspectors that they've put those processes in place. So again, we'll go through these individually now during the course of this to show you exactly what the inspectors are looking at and how you can make sure that you've got the evidence they need in place. So the first thing we'll look at is your fire risk assessment. So in a healthcare setting, the primary purpose of a fire risk assessment is to protect the life, not just the life of yourselves as workers, but obviously the lives of your patients, your visitors, your contractors, anyone that could be on site. So there are 2 different types of fire risk assessments. There's one's to protect property and the other to protect life. But as I said, in a healthcare setting, life is the priority. That's what we're fundamentally trying to do here, make sure that no one is seriously injured or worse. So when you do a fire risk assessment, You need to identify all the potential hazards in your practice. So in a dental practice, there's lots. You obviously are very aware of your sterilization equipment. You've got your electrical equipment, your flammable substances. You've got other equipment then, such as your compressors, suction motors, Bunsen burners if you use them. You've got medical gases, especially nitrous oxide if you're doing sedation. You've got laser equipment if you're doing cosmetic treatments. There's lots and lots of things in dental practice that pose a potential fire risk. You've also then got a lot of fuel in your dental practice. You've got your archive, your patient records, your stock, lots and lots of things that together can cause a potentially big fire or big problem for your practice. So the fire risk assessment needs to collate and identify all those individual hazards. And then it needs to assess and determine what the right control measures are to reduce the risk of a fire starting and then a fire spreading and compromising the safety of people on site. So there's quite a few things that it will consider as part of the assessment process. It will consider what fire detection and alarm system you need for your practice, and that's determined by the size, the layout, the complexity, how many floors, how many people you've got, and the types of hazards that are present. It will also look and assess as well what compartmentation you need in the practice. So compartmentation is ensuring that fire and smoke can't spread from one room to the other and circulate around the practice quickly, which may compromise the means of escape. So a lot of this is down to the materials that the walls and doors are built out of to make sure that they can catch fire, that they can contain the spread sufficiently, that there's no defects in the walls and the ceilings, no holes, no gaps that can promote the spread of fire. So that's a very technical thing to put into the assessment, because you need to have a good understanding of the materials and their fire resistant properties. You've also then got your emergency lighting. So there needs to be a sufficient amount of lighting in your practice to ensure that in the case of power failure, people can still vacate the premises quickly and efficiently without stumbling in the darkness, bumping into things, or delaying their means of escape. Then you need to ensure that you've got an appropriate number of escapes and your travel distances from the furthest part in that property to the nearest escape is sufficient. So again, very technical knowledge you need to have in relation to the escape routes to ensure that your travel distances are understood and that you're not trying to travel from the top floor of your practice to an exit that's really far away that could delay you. So there's a lot of factors to consider in your fire risk assessment. And that leads me on to this point now, is that when you do a fire risk assessment, whether that's yourselves trying to do it in-house or whether you're getting someone in to do that externally, you need to make sure that whoever is doing that assessment is competent to do so. So competent means that they need to have the necessary skills, experience, and training to understand what a fire risk assessment is, how to implement it in the practice, and how to then assess the control measures that are needed to mitigate the risk as far as possible. So without any of that technical knowledge, without the understanding of your different types of fire alarms, your different fire properties and materials and that, you wouldn't be deemed competent to do it. So you need to really ensure that whoever's doing your risk assessments has that level of experience and knowledge behind them. And to put that into perspective from an inspector's point of view, lack of competency is the single biggest compliance failure when it comes to FRAs. So these are all quotes that you can see on your screen now that we've taken from inspection reports. And these quotes are becoming more and more recurrent over the years. So it's quite evident now that inspectors are not just looking at the fire risk assessment as a tick box exercise, a piece of information to show that you've done it. They're now focusing their attention actually on the person that's doing that assessment. So these are all very relevant quotes, all taken from inspection reports this year. And we can see the trend here from an inspector's point of view. They will look at the assessment, but then they will question the person who's done that assessment to determine whether or not that person is competent. And in these cases, they identified that they weren't, and they weren't happy with that, and they flagged that as a concern in the reports and advised each of these practices to get someone in externally to do the assessment instead. The other problem with trying to do an assessment in-house and doing it yourself is it does bring into that a level of bias. We all become quite familiar with the environments that we work in. So when we're trying to do assessments ourselves, we can become naturally biased towards that or complacent with regards to what it is we do. So it is always better to get someone in to do any sort of assessment like this, especially fire, because of the risk involved with it, who's going to be completely non-biased and be able to see things without any of that complacency, without any of that familiarization of the practice. And that is one of the key areas that inspectors are looking at. And again, that is one of the biggest reasons why they're flagging fire risk assessments as a problem area at the moment in time. So, as I said, when you get a fire risk assessment done, it's always better to try and get someone in to do it. It's also worth noting that no matter if you are getting someone externally in, it is still your responsibility to ensure that that person or that company is competent to do it. So it doesn't mean that you can just go down the road to any Joe Blogs and pull them in to do your fire risk assessment. You need to have assurances and verify that that company or that person that you are contracting to do it for you has, again, the relevant level of training, insurance in place, qualifications, that they understand the task that's been assigned to them, and they've got experience in that field as well. So again, not all fire risk assessors are familiar with a dental practice. So if you get a fire risk assessor in that has done it for a retail establishment, for example, they won't necessarily be able to interpret the risks and hazards that are associated in dental practice. So it's always better to get or assign a contractor that works or has experience in the healthcare sector so they can specifically apply that knowledge to ourselves. So we've partnered as a company with two very big companies out there, very, very experienced in the healthcare sector, Chubb and Life Environmental Services. So both of these provide fire risk assessments. They've got experience in the healthcare sector and they can help our members with putting these in place. But whoever you assign, like I said, if you don't use Tube Life, there's lots and lots of companies out there. You're free to choose one, but please ensure that you verify their competence before you contract them and pay them to do the service. So after the fire risk assessment is done, it will then start to identify all those additional control measures you need in place. And one of those control measures is that you must have appropriate firefighting and fire detection equipment in your practice. So firefighter equipment, we're all very familiar with these. Your fire extinguishers, they're your most common type of firefighting equipment. You have got other versions. You've got sprinkler systems. That's another type of firefighting equipment. I am aware that there's a couple of practices in the UK that got sprinklers, but in the majority of cases, it's fire extinguishers that you'll be familiar with. So you've got 6 variations. You've got your water, your CO2, powder, foam, wet chemical, and fire blankets. But in a dental practice, these are the ones that we should have in place: water, CO2, foam, and fire blankets. A powder extinguisher is a very universal extinguisher. It can cater for the majority of types of fire, but it does come with its problems. It produces a lot of like a dust sort of substance when it's released, which can impair vision in an internal environment. So powder extinguishers are no longer recommended to be used internally. They're more suitable for external environments, like big open spaces like garages. So I've experienced a lot of practices still having powder extinguishers in, but the advice is now that if you've got a powder, you replace it with something more suitable, such as a CO2 or foam. Again, what type of replacement you need, you would need to identify that as part of your assessment or by speaking to your fire maintenance contractors. And the other one was the wet chemical. A wet chemical is more suited for a catering environment where you've got big cooking appliances that deal with fats and oils and things like that. So again, you won't find one of those, or you shouldn't find one of those in a dental setting. So water, CO2, foam, and fire blankets. So when you have these in place, you need to make sure that you've got them available on all floors. They must be accessible. They must be identified by signs. They must be located at a convenient height and within a suitable travel distance. So all those points there are things that would be considered as part of the fire risk assessment, and you need to be able to then clearly understand what provision of firefighting equipment is suitable for your premises. So once we've dealt with the fire equipment, we're then looking at your detection and alarms. So there's two different types of systems. You've got your non-automatic systems. These are very, very basic type systems that consist of things like bells, whistles, horns, or verbally shouting that there's a fire in place. These are very, very simple. They're very, very basic, and they're only intended for low-risk environments, usually single-story premises where the identification of a fire is evident. So you can see it. It's very, very prominent to everyone in the vicinity of that fire to enable them to vacate and start their evacuation processes quickly. Non-automatic systems are not suitable for anything over one story, or if you've got a large, complex layout, because you won't necessarily hear these sort of raising alarm from the nearest to the furthest point in your premises. So these are getting picked up again a lot as part of fire risk assessments, and they're also getting picked up by inspectors as well. If you have this sort of system in place, it needs to be able to be justified that it's suitable for your premises. So if you haven't got that justification in your fire risk assessment, then you are potentially at risk. So the more suitable alarm system for a dental practice would be your automatic systems. These contain detectors that will automatically trigger the alarm and then provide the audible warning throughout the premises. There are 5 different levels of automatic systems. L is the category of the alarm system that stands for life. So as I said earlier, we try and protect the life of the occupants within it. And an L5 alarm system is a custom installation. That means you will have detectors located sporadically around your premises determined by the risk identified in the FRA. You've then got an L4 system. So that means you would have detectors installed in your escape routes only. An L3 system means that you'd have detectors installed in your escape routes and any room adjoining the escape route. An L2 system would be as per the L3, so your escape routes, your adjoining rooms, and in any areas of higher risk, maybe a cellar or your decontamination room or an attic space. And then an L1 system, you would have detectors installed throughout the premises. So that is the categories of alarms. But the right one for you is determined by your fire risk assessment. So you need to make sure that you do the assessment first to understand what level of detection you need before you go and put that detection in place. So the guidance, the HTM guidance around fire safety does state that a healthcare premises should have an L2 or 3 system. They are your preference. Okay. So again, that's the preference. If you've got anything different to that, whether you've got a non-automatic system or you've got an L4 or L5, you need to make sure you've got a written justification that then provides evidence to any inspector coming in that that system is suitable for your premises. And then lastly, we've got your emergency lights. So you need an emergency light system in place. As I briefly mentioned earlier, the whole point of that is if there's a power failure, not just a localized power failure to your practice, but a regionalized one that we sometimes get, that members, patients, your staff members, any visitors on site need to be able to still vacate the premises quickly. So you need to have sufficient provision to enable them to do that. In an ideal world, the emergency light system will be an automatic system. So as soon as there's a power failure, your emergency lights kick in and illumination is provided instantaneously. A lot of practices are still using handheld devices such as torches to provide the provision, but they come with their own problems. If there is a power failure, you've then got to find that torch before you can start illuminating the means of escape. So it's not instantaneous. If the torches themselves are not highlighted with luminescent paint or stickers or anything like that, then again, they're going to be difficult to find. So again, torches are not ideal. In a healthcare environment, when we consider that we're going to have elderly patients, maybe disabled patients, anxious patients, children, the instantaneous light is always going to be the better solution to allow them to instantly start evacuating the premises. So again, from an inspector's point of view, they're looking at this into a lot more detail at the moment. They're not just looking at the fire risk assessment to see what provisions it's made, but they're looking at the systems that you've already got in place to determine whether they feel that those systems are relevant and suitable for your premises. So you can see on a couple of the quotes here, they've identified that there's manual systems in place, horns, there's torches, but they're not happy with that. There's no justification behind having them. They weren't incorporated into the fire risk assessment. Therefore, the inspectors are not satisfied that those systems are suitable for the requirements of those practices. And fundamentally, those practices have had to then go away, contact these service engineers and get a suitable system in place. So where they may have tried to cut corners originally and do a bit of cost saving, it has fundamentally cost them that money anyway, because they've had to go away retrospectively and put it all in place regardless. So get your fire risk assessment done first, identify the control measures that are suitable for your premises, then put them in place. Don't put your control measures in place without your fire risk assessment, because you're likely to put the wrong measures in place. So once you've got all your equipment in place, then we've got a legal requirement to maintain that equipment. And there's two elements of maintenance as well. So we get queried a lot about this in Agilio. A lot of queries come through regarding what types of maintenance and the intervals that are required. So to cover these off, you've got the first type of maintenance, which is your planned preventative maintenance, PPM. This is where you contract a service engineer, a company to come in and maintain that equipment on a recurring basis. So for extinguishers, the requirement is to maintain them every 12 months. The service engineer will come in, give them a full service, make sure that they're suitable and don't need to be replaced. For your automatic alarm systems, they need to be serviced every 6 months. So this is quite a common one. We are aware that there's a lot of practices that come to us and they question this, and they've got a 12 monthly service in place. 12 monthly is not suitable. All these frequencies come from British standards, and British standards set the precedents for what the expectations are. That's what your service engineers are trained to. That's what your fire risk assessments are trained to follow. And that's what also your healthcare regulators are trained to follow, as well as their benchmark expectations. So British standards for fire alarms state 6 months as a minimum. For emergency lights, it's 12 months. So that should be your planned preventative, 12, 6, and 12 months for those pieces of equipment. Then you've got your in-house monitoring. So this is where a delegated or nominated person within your practice, usually the fire marshal, will undertake a series of checks themselves on all this equipment, and they will do it more frequently than your planned preventative maintenance. So this consists of walking around the premises, having a look at these pieces of equipment, doing various tests, various checks to make sure that there's nothing obviously wrong with them and that they're still in good working order. So for your extinguishers, when you're walking around and checking those, you need to first make sure that they're present and they're easy to access. So that means that they haven't been accidentally moved to a different location, they haven't been hidden away. We do find a lot of cases that extinguishers have been used to prop open doors. That shouldn't be the case. Or if you've had building work in place, then the builders may have relocated those extinguishers for access for whatever reason and forgot to put them back. So when you're checking, make sure that they're still where they should be. Extinguishers need to be wall mounted or located on a stand. So if they're just freestanding on the floor, that's not suitable. Make sure that you get a wall mount or a stand for them. All extinguishers need to be accompanied by their corresponding ID sign. So a water extinguisher should have an ID, a water ID sign, either on the wall above it or on the stand if it is on a stand. That's quite a common issue as well, where extinguishers have been moved around and you've got a water extinguisher located under a CO2 sign. So make sure the signs and extinguishers match up. Also make sure that your extinguishers are free from any obvious signs of damage. They're not dented, there's no cracks in the casing or the hose, no marks or anything like that on them that could compromise their use. Make sure also that the tamper seal is intact. So a tamper seal is a sort of is similar to a zip tie, and it goes around the handle of the extinguisher to show that it hasn't been used before. If you find that zip tie, the tamper seal, is snapped, missing, then that indicates that the extinguisher may have already been used, which could compromise its ability to be effective when you need it. So if you find the tamper seal missing or compromised in any way, speak to your service engineers and get that extinguisher replaced. You also then need to check the pressure gauge. Not all extinguishers have a pressure gauge, a CO2 will, and the pressure gauges are quite similar to what you find on your medical gas cylinders. So there'll be a little indicator up by the handle, and it will have a red zone and a green zone. So make sure that the pin is in the green zone. If it's in the red zone, it indicates that the extinguisher has been used, or that it's lost some of its internal pressure. And again, that will affect its effectiveness when you need it. So if the pressure gauge is in red, again, you need to make sure that that extinguisher is replaced. With fire alarms, you need to test the system every week. Okay, so MCP stands for your manual call points, and that is what you can see in the picture on the left-hand side. So if you've got an automatic system, you should have manual call points present in your premises. So you need to test a manual call point every week. You don't need to test them all. You pick one and then rotate that every single week. So during the course of the year, every manual call point would have been tested at least once. When you're testing it, it's to ensure that the alarm sounds and it provides the warning throughout the premises. If you don't know how to test your alarm system and you don't know how to manage that in relation to the system that you have, speak to your fire service contractor. They will happily come in. It'll either be on the next service or they can come in ad hoc, and they'll provide you guidance and training on how to do it with your system. So if it's something you've never done before, pick up the phone, speak to your contractor, invite them in, and they'll run through that with you. You also then need to make sure that your MCPs are free from damage or defects. So make sure that they're not hanging from the wall. Make sure that the little glass or they're more plastic these days, but make sure that hasn't cracked or hasn't been depressed already, that could compromise its functionality. Make sure that they're visible and unobstructed. So again, a lot of cases we see these alarm systems installed when a practice has gone through a big refurbishment. And then subsequently, a practice may buy stock shelving, cupboards, things like that, and they get placed over these manual call points. So make sure they're all visible, unobstructed. Make sure they're easy to access as well. So again, the whole point of these call points is to enable anyone on site to press them and trigger the alarm. So make sure they're in a convenient location where people can reach them easily. They should also be accompanied by a fire safety action notice as well. Very simple instructions, a little poster or a little notice that you put up on the wall adjacent to them that provides simple information on what people need to do in the event of a fire. And then check your control panel as well. Make sure that the control panel that operates the entire system has no flashing warning lights, warning notices on it, that it's all clear to make sure that it's in working effect. So again, any issues that you find during the checks, speak to your alarm provider and make sure that they come in and address those as soon as possible. With regards to your emergency lights, then, you need to do similar to the alarms. You need to test your system on a monthly basis. So emergency lights will be distinguishable from normal lights through an LED. It'll either be green in color or red in color. But when you walk around your practice and have a look at all your light fittings, if you see an LED on one of those light fittings, that will indicate that it's an emergency light. Any light fitting that doesn't have an LED will be a normal light fitting. So make sure that you know which lights are your normal ones and which ones are your emergency lights, and check that those LEDs are in working order, that they're lit all the time. By being lit indicates that there's power in that emergency light unit to ensure that it will work in the event of a power failure. Once you know your emergency lights, which ones are which, you then need to test them. So just like your alarm system, physically test the emergency light system to make sure that it illuminates. So you're essentially simulating a power failure. How to do that, again, will depend on the system that you've got installed. You will generally have an emergency light test facility somewhere in your practice, and a little test key as well that looks a bit like a fish. So again, if you're not quite sure how to test your emergency lights, you don't know what your test facility looks like, and you haven't got this test key, speak to your emergency light service provider. And again, they will come in, they'll provide you with the tools you need, and they'll give you the instructions on how to do the system, so then you can implement that moving forward. Also check that the light units are free from damage. So make sure that the casing on your light units haven't cracked. Again, they're not hanging from the ceiling, and then there's no obvious signs of damage or defect with them. And make sure that they're visible and unobstructed. So again, if you've installed high-level cabinetry in one of your surgeries or environments, make sure that that hasn't obstructed the emergency light unit in the ceiling. If it has, we need to relocate that emergency light unit to a better location. The other case as well is if you've had refurbishment work, sometimes contractors will cover the emergency lights up to protect them from dust and stuff, but they may leave that covering in place when they vacate the site. So again, we're looking for any obvious signs of obstruction on them. So those are the tests you need to do when you're walking around the practice, looking at your fire equipment. The key thing as well with this is you need to log this down somewhere. And you need to do this to evidence to inspectors that you're putting this in place and doing it effectively. There's a lot of cases that practices do these checks, but don't record the outcomes of it. Again, when you record the outcomes of these tests, it's not just a tick box exercise. Make sure that any issues, observations you find, you record down, and then you have the actions in place then to demonstrate what you've done about those. Inspectors always prefer to see how you've managed improvements rather than just a tick, 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 tick exercise. If you've got a concern and then you've proactively shown how you address that, that is, for an inspector's point of view, they love that. This shows proactive management of fire safety risk. So we've got a template in the iComply system that we can use, but you can get logbooks from your fire maintenance contractors. You can buy other templates and logbooks online, but make sure you've got a system in place to record these checks. So again, looking at this from the inspector's point of view, they're quite savvy with regards to how they go about their inspections. They will physically walk around the site and they will kind of do their own visual checks, just like you should be doing yourselves on the equipment. So they will then correspond and cross-reference what they found as part of their visual observations with your fire log checklist to make sure that the two tie up. If they've seen that a fire extinguisher is not wall mounted and you haven't flagged that on your fire checklist, it will show to them that those checks, in-house checks, are not being done effectively. So don't try and hide things from them. Be open, be honest, identify the concerns, record them down, because inspectors will find these themselves when they're walking around and simulating those checks themselves. The other thing they will do as well is check your service records. So make sure you've got accurate, up-to-date service records for all your equipment on site, and those reflect the time frames that I mentioned earlier. So again, as I said, British standards provide those governance, and inspectors are trained to follow those standards. So you can see there in the bottom right that in this particular case, the fire alarm has been serviced annually. The inspector flagged that should be 6 monthly. So again, they know what the standards state, and they are assessing your practices in correspondence to those standards. So again, we've partnered with Chubb for this. You need to have a competent fire maintenance contractor in place. We've picked Chubb, probably the biggest provider in the UK on fire maintenance. But again, you're free to go with anyone you want. There's lots of contractors out there that provide this maintenance service. But again, find one that is competent to do it. I've come across a lot of contractors, a lot of cowboy contractors in particular, that deviate from the standards, and then they try and justify their rationale for doing that. If that's the case, that does put you in a tricky position then, because the inspectors are going to come in with their idea that things need to be done 12 monthly or 6 monthly. And if your contractor has said anything different, you're in the middle then between the contractor and the inspector to try and justify the rationale, and it can be quite difficult for yourselves. So find a contractor that you can trust and that will do things appropriately to follow the expectations of the regulators and the British standards. Then you've got your fire procedures then. So your fire procedures are a bespoke set of instructions that need to reflect how you go about managing fire safety in your practice. So all the things you can see here are what your procedure should cover. And it needs to be tailored to your practice as well. It needs to be suitable for the processes that you have in place. It needs to account for all the hazards you have in place, and obviously the size, layout, and the staff you have on site as well. So again, you don't get one size fits all when it comes to this. Every practice operates differently. Every practice is a different size. So make sure that you have a tailored procedure to reflect that. And make sure it includes all those details as well. So it's clear to inspectors looking at that you've thought about it, you've written that down, and then you've communicated that to your team. As I mentioned earlier as well, when I was talking about the fire alarms, you should also have a simplified version of those procedures, something called a fire action notice. You usually find these in little A5 size that you can buy on various websites, and then you wall mount them up opposite your fire alarm call points or near your fire exits. The intention of these is for people that are unfamiliar with your premises, such as visitors and patients. So if a visitor sees a fire and they go and activate your fire alarm, they immediately then have got basic instructions on what they need to do that should indicate where their fire exits are, where the assembly point is, and what instructions they need to follow. Okay, so these are very, very useful tool to have in the practice, and you should have them displayed in a lot of communal areas as well, where patients and visitors can see them. So again, this is our template in the iComply system, but as I said, you can get these from various sources. So iComply members have got them. But anyone else, go online, have a look, speak to your fire maintenance contractors. They've probably got them as well as part of their products and services, and make sure you get them. There is lots of different various types that you can get. You can get some standard ones that don't allow you to bespoke any of the information on it. My advice would be to refrain from those, because you want to be able to ideally indicate where your assembly point is and where your nearest evacuation route is as well. Without that information, it's going to cause confusion to patients because they're not going to know where to go or how to escape the premises. So try and find one that you can bespoke and enter in the key details. You've also got something called a PEEP, which is a personal emergency evacuation plan. So these are tailored around people that may need assistance in evacuating the premises, people with impairments, disabilities, the elderly, pregnant women may need these as well. Anyone really that may be delayed in evacuating the premises quickly may require a PEEP. And it's a tailored set of instructions tailored around that person to help them get out of the practice. In a dental practice, you will normally have a lot of standard procedures, chaperoning. Your reception team will help people in the waiting area vacate the premises. Your dentist will naturally help patients in the chair vacate the premises. So you'll naturally have standard procedures in place, but you need to have a process in place to communicate those procedures to patients and then give them the option to ask for assistance if they need something more. So again, it's important never to presume that everyone will need assistance. Many people with disabilities are able to vacate themselves from a practice safely and quickly without any aid. So never presume, but put a process in place to communicate your procedures, and then that gives them the opportunity to come to you and go, oh, I need a little bit more help. If they come to you asking for that little bit more help, you then need to sit with them, have a consultation with them, understand their requirements, and document all that down as part of their notes. Make sure your staff are aware of those notes, train your staff in accordance with those requirements, and then whenever that patient's on site, you should have all that information there available for your staff, ready in the event that you need to help them. So the other set of things you need to do around fire procedures are evacuation drills. So as we identified in the trends earlier on, this is quite a common problem. Not a lot of practices are doing drills, or where they are, they haven't got the recorded evidence of doing them. So the whole point of the drills is to rehearse your procedures. The written procedures that you've put down, drills are there to put them into practice. By doing the drills will help you identify problems, it'll help you identify where things are may not working, and that then will give you the ability to evolve those procedures and get them to a working ability that is suitable for your needs. So you should really be carrying out a minimum of 1 evacuation a year, but the advice really is to carry out 2 a year. And the reason for that is to account for absences such as annual leave, holidays, illness, things like that. So by carrying out 2 a year, anyone that missed one of the evacuation drills, you can then include in the next one. So over the course of the 12 months, every member of your team has been involved in at least 1 evacuation drill. When you plan your evacuation drills, it's always best not to tell your team because you want to try and catch them off guard. You don't want them being prepared, waiting by the door, ready to leave. You want to understand how they would react in the real situation. So keep them quiet. Don't communicate when you're going to do them. You're trying to get the team, trying to understand how the team will respond. You don't have to involve patients or visitors in your evacuation drills, but it's good practice to do it. But obviously be conscious of the patients and visitors if you're going to involve them. It's probably best to give them a heads up, give them a bit of pre-warning. We're going to do this evacuation on this day at this time. Would you be happy to be involved in it? If they say yes, great, get them involved. If they say no, then change the date of your evacuation drill. Because again, a lot of patients book in their slots according to their own needs. We don't want to compromise their needs or create any more don't want to make them any more anxious or anything like that. So speak to your patients beforehand to see if they're happy to be involved. If they are, great, because then you can see how your team members will react to that as well. Also try and bring some sort of scenarios into your evacuation drills, a bit of role play, make them a little bit fun. I've heard a lot of different stories of what practices have done. I've heard of practices putting teddy bears into a toilet or a stock room with a little note around its neck saying, I'm a patient, I'm having an asthma attack, please help. I've had actually staff members as well simulating a faint during the evacuation drill as well, and not telling anyone that they're going to do it. So there's lots of different options. You can bring whatever you want into it to try and make it a little bit fun, a little bit different. And sometimes doing that sort of thing is good as well, because you can see then how your team would react in a real life situation if those sort of things were to happen. You've also got to appoint fire marshals. So the role of a fire marshal is to oversee your fire procedures, make sure they're working, make sure they're effective, to help with the evacuation drills, to coordinate with the fire services, to oversee the fire checks that you do in-house, and to make sure the equipment is being maintained effectively. So essentially, your role of a fire marshal is to help you as a practice manager delegate those responsibilities, try and ease the burden on yourself. Give the roles to them, let them do that, and make sure they're trained to do that job. In addition to your fire marshals, then, you have to give all your team basic fire awareness training. So every one member of your team should be inducted when they first started, which includes advice around your fire safety procedures, the risks according to the fire risk assessment, how to evacuate, where your assembly point is, where the location of your extinguishers are, and how to raise the alarm. So all the basic information around your practice should be provided on induction. And then you should be repeating that information reoccurringly throughout the employment then. So the expectation of inspectors is that you do that annually. It is also the expectation of inspectors as well that fire awareness training is certified. They don't like that training being done in-house. They don't like to see meeting minutes or anything like that. They want to see certified certificate for all your staff members, and they will check that every year as well to make sure that it hasn't gone out of date. So here's some comments regarding fire procedures. So again, this covers all the various different elements I just talked about, your drills, your training. But you can see trends here. There are a couple of things that inspectors are looking out for. And a lot of this is around having the documented evidence. So the staff training in particular, practices are not doing the drills, they're not recording them down, they're not doing the fire safety awareness training with staff. And inspectors will physically ask your staff members as well. So they won't come to you to necessarily ask for evidence of this. They're going to go to your team members and say, right, when was the last time you had a fire drill? And if the team member shrugs his shoulders or doesn't know, that reflects badly on you as a practice and shows that you haven't put these in place. They will also look at your fire procedures, your fire safety action plans to make sure that they're bespoke, they're relevant, and they're suitable for your needs. So they will drill down into this in quite a bit of detail. So you need to make sure you've got this evidence on file. So again, when you do your training, fire marshal training, it needs to be undertaken in work hours, and you need to make sure that you use a suitable fire marshal training provider. So again, when it comes to training, it's always best practice to have hands-on training with fire for fire marshals, because that gives them the physical, that makes them customized to the actual use of the units themselves. It identifies them with the weight of extinguishers, how to hold them, where not to put their hands, especially in the case of CO2 extinguishers, because the casing can get quite cold, and how much pressure you need to apply to the trigger as well to release it. Without that fundamental information, a lot of fire marshals that I spoke with that have only done training online courses have come back to me and said, we wouldn't be happy using an extinguisher because we haven't actually held one and used it. So hands-on is always the preferred. And in that case, make sure you send your fire marshals to a suitable training provider for that. So Chubb is, again, the partner that we've gone with for that, as well as St. John's Ambulance. So a lot of people associate St. John's Ambulance with first aid training, but they do also provide fire marshal training as well. For the fire awareness, again, as I mentioned, certification is what the CQC and HIW inspectors look for this. So we've obviously got an iLearn product as part of the Agilio services that we provide. And iLearn has a whole host of CBD training courses, and fire awareness education is one of those courses. So this is me. I've done my course. I did it last year. I'm a certified in this now. I'd have my evidence to show to inspectors that I've done that training. So if you're not an iLearn member, you've got a pop-up here on your screens now if you want to know more about iLearn and the other training courses that it provides as well. Please feel free to click the pop-up and we can provide a demo of the services. If you are already an iLearn member, then please ensure that all your team have undertaken this training and you've got certificates on file so you're inspection ready. If you're doing your training with other providers, again, make sure you've got that evidence on file. Make sure that every team member has got a certificate ready for the inspectors when they come on site and ask. So in summary, to look at all that, make sure that you've got an up-to-date fire risk assessment. That is the first and foremost and most important thing before any of the other steps. Make sure that's reflective of your practice. It's being kept up to date as well, so it corresponds to the processes that you have in place. And again, more importantly, make sure it's been done by someone competent and you can demonstrate that. So again, if you are doing it in-house, that's fine. You need to make sure that you can demonstrate your competence to do a fire risk assessment to the CQC or HIW when they ask you. If you've got any concerns about your competence, my advice would always be, don't take the risk. Don't put that onus on yourself, because fundamentally, if something goes wrong, you will be accountable for it. Go and get someone else in to do it for you. That's always better because you can essentially pass the responsibility over to them then. Make sure you've got a suitable number of firefighting equipment and it's appropriate to your needs as well. So again, that will be dictated by your fire risk assessment. Don't get the equipment in place first before getting the assessment done, because the two may not tie up, and then you find you have to retrospectively buy different equipment afterwards. Same with the fire detection system and the emergency light system. Make sure they're suitable. Make sure they tie into your fire risk assessment. And again, don't go to your local shops buying off-the-shelf detectors and alarms, because they may not be suitable for your premises. Do what the fire risk assessment says is suitable for your site. Follow those control measures and implement it suitably to, again, evidence to your inspectors that you have done what is necessary for your premise. When you've got all that in place, make sure you've got your certified evidence on site, that your equipment is being maintained, tested, and inspected in-house as well by yourselves. Make sure all of that is on record. You've got your certificates available, and you've got your fire logbook or your fire checklist for your in-house checks ready. As I said, make sure any actions identified either by the maintenance contractor or via in-house checks have been addressed, and you've got recorded evidence of how you've managed that. Great way to demonstrate quality improvement and how you are proactively managing those risks going forward. Ensure you've got the bespoke fire emergency procedure in place that reflects your practice, reflects the people on site, reflects their names, their responsibilities, and reflects the processes you've got in place. A lot of practices have done the emergency procedures, but over time they've become out of date and haven't kept them relevant. So again, inspectors will cross-reference what's in the procedures to what they've seen in practice, what information they've obtained from questioning your staff members, and they want to see that the two coincide. Any discrepancies between that information, they will flag as a concern. Train your staff on the emergency procedures. Again, make sure you've got certified evidence of that, and ensure you've got a suitable number of fire marshals in place as well. So again, when it comes to your fire marshals, the objective is always to have one fully trained fire marshal at all times. So you need to think about your staff rotas, your shift patterns, what times you're open, who's present, holidays, absences like annual leave, things like that. So in a lot of cases, one trained fire marshal wouldn't be enough. You would need to have a minimum of two. Some cases you need to have more than that depending on your local circumstances. So assess and establish what you need. You can use the fire risk assessment as well to help you with that, but put in the appropriate number of people to ensure there's always cover in place. So again, iComply members, we've got a suite of documents in place for these. So if you're not already aware of these in the system, this is a list we've got of everything that can help you. So we've got all the templates that I've covered as part of this webinar. We've got the procedures, evacuation plans. We've got the PEEPs and the fire action notice. We have got a fire risk assessment as well, but please, again, only use that if you're competent to do so. We've got a policy. We've got an overview that elaborates a lot more on the information I've explained in this webinar. So it goes through a bit more detail of your in-house checks and stuff. So if you're not already aware of all these, please make yourself familiar with them. We've also got other services as well that we could help people with. So we got iManage. So that's where a dedicated iManager will be appointed to your account. And their role is to go through all these documents for you. They will automatically bespoke and adopt these policies and templates for your needs. They will review your fire risk assessment, whether you've done that yourself or contracted an external member contractor to do that for you. They will then help you identify if there's any concerns, how to manage the outputs and actions identified within that. So it's a real good hand-holding process where this manager kind of takes a lot of the burden off your shoulders and does as much of that work for you as possible with the advice and knowledge to go behind it. So again, if you want to know how we can help you in any of those elements, if you want to inquire more about our iManage provision, then the pop-up is on your screen. So please feel free to give us a call just to inquire, ask the questions and see how we can help you with that. Thank you all.